This is Katrina from College App. Student loans. She has been in the business for over 25 years. Freshman Funbox found her at the NACAC conference in New York, where, you know, they had all the different schools and people talking about student loans and things of that nature. So I wanted to bring her in because she is very knowledgeable in what she does. And I'll let you have it, Katrina.
So much. Yes, I work at College App student loans now, but I've been in the field for over 25 years, including a couple of college campuses in financial aid. So I have a lot of experience on the financial aid side of things. I'm sorry we've had so much trouble with the audio here, but what I do want to kind of repeat the answer to the last question, which was to talk about Seog grants. And so that was one of the questions that was given to Peachy ahead of time. So Seog basically stands for Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. And I just wanted to explain the difference. When you're looking at financial aid programs on a campus, what happens is, as a family, you're applying for financial aid. Some of it, basically you're applying for need-based financial aid on a campus, but there are also sometimes merit-based scholarships that are available to you through the admissions office. So just take note of that. But financial aid, when you do a financial aid application, you complete that, which is the universal application is the free application for federal student aid, and it's the FAFSA. When you complete that, you're essentially asking the financial aid office to figure out how much to give you through any of the different programs, one of which is Seog. And so that's, again, Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. It is a federal program. And what happens is the financial aid office is only given like a certain pot of money for Seog. So it's kind of like federal work study. They only get like a pool of it, and then they have to sort of distribute it out to people based on need. So it tends to be given to more the higher need families. And from my experience, having worked at Syracuse University and University of Rochester, my experience is that we tended to give it to those students who were Pell recipients because those were really the highest needs families. But that's not an exact science. So that may be different at one college versus the next. So if you receive a federal Pell Grant at one college, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get Seog there. But at another college, you might. It's just a matter of how they can equitably spend the Seog funding because it is quite limited on the amounts. And in terms of dollar amounts, I mean, I would say probably you would see something like 500, 1,000. Like, it's not going to be thousands of dollars like Pell can be, but it will, it can, they're trying to kind of divvy it up a little bit. So the amounts are relatively small, but they're super helpful for people who are higher need and they're trying to get a hold of anything that they can get because it's free money. So you don't have to pay it back.
Okay, so when we're talking about financial aid, and we all know, financial aid officers get a pot of money in order to distribute it to the students. So how important is it that people apply or people file their FAFSA on October 1st? Because, they changed the date. It used to be at the top of the year, and now they've since moved it from October, and they've also changed the way they calculate things. So how important is it that they actually file on October 1st or around that time?
Okay, great question. So it used to be that you had the first date you could apply was January 1st. Let's say right now we're in 2019. So in January 1st, 2019, you would be applying for the fall of 2019 and, essentially spring of 2020. Now they've backed up the FAFSA kickoff date, if you will. It's been a few years now, but October 1st is the first date that you're able to actually file it. You do not have to file it on October 1st. And if you want to, that's awesome. And that's great if you really want to, if you're eager and you want to get that application out there. But the truth of the matter is what you really have to adhere to are the deadlines for each financial aid office. So if you're applying to 5 different colleges, let's say, or 10 or 2 or whatever the number is, you need to find out what the deadlines are for each of them. Because if you're applying for a regular decision, let's say you want to apply regular decision through admissions, they're going to have a certain deadline for you. It might be February something. a lot of times the deadlines are February 1st or February 15th. But if you're an early decision applicant, meaning like I really want to go to this college, like I really want to go to Syracuse University, then you would be applying as a quote unquote early decision, or sometimes referred to as early action, which is a little bit different, but it's also an early program. And so those deadlines are earlier. So they're probably more like November 15th, December, early December type of thing. So my advice to you is to make sure that you know what all the deadlines are. Maybe keep a spreadsheet of, especially if you're applying to a lot of different colleges, keep a list somehow, even if it's good old fashioned paper, however you're going to do it, make sure you know what the deadlines are. And none of the deadlines are going to be October 1st, because the college would never do that to you, because that's the first date it kicks off. So they would never make that your deadline. But there are plenty of eager folks who get it done that early. And the truth of the matter is you can now, because as Peachy was alluding to, they changed the FAFSA a few years ago. So when they backed it up to October 1st, they also changed the data they were asking for. So they're now asking for what they call prior year tax data, which is really just lingo for, you used to put your 2018 data down, but now you're actually putting 2017 down on the 2019-20 FAFSA. So you could literally file it October 1st, because it has nothing to do with April being the tax deadlines.
Okay.
But just look at the deadlines for the schools, and that'll be key.
Okay, so that's interesting that you would say that, because a lot of times, especially students, they're under this, mind control that they have to file on October 1st, because it's going to affect the amount of student financial aid that they actually will receive. And then a lot of parents don't understand the prior year, and they think that they're going to get in trouble because they don't file that FAFSA. And then you spoke about the deadlines, that's almost like hidden, because when they get these packets, they don't pay attention to the financial aid office's deadlines. Everybody's just concerned about getting that application in, getting that letter. But, people don't really think about, let me read this paperwork again and find the date that financial aid is requiring that I have my paperwork in. So that's a huge disconnect. And, how would you, where exactly would they find that? When they get the admissions letter, or when they get the acceptance letter for lack of a better term, is there something specific they need to be looking for? Because a lot of times people miss those dates because they just don't seem very clear.
Okay. So you definitely do not want to wait until you get your admissions acceptance, because by that time you're already late. Most of the time the deadlines are essentially, what you should do is sort of simultaneously, you're applying for admissions, but you're also applying for financial aid. So you kind of have to do that all at one time. And it is absolutely true that you could look at the sticker price of a college that you've got on your list of however many, 5 or something like that. And one of them has a really high sticker price, and you think to yourself, well, I'm not going to be able to afford this. It's too high priced. You should never do that, because you're going to count yourself out of some place that might be a good academic fit or a good social fit for the student. And the truth is, they may have a very generous financial aid program that makes it quite affordable. So don't not apply, basically, because of the sticker price. But definitely, in terms of where to find the answers, the website is the first place to start. So sometimes when you log on to a college website, so let's just say you log on to nyu.edu or something like that. When you do that, you could Google just NYU financial aid, because it'll actually get you right to the page. I go to financial aid pages daily, and so from different colleges. And so the easiest way to find financial aid is just to Google the college name and financial aid, because if you start at the top of that pyramid and try to drill down, it's just going to take you longer. Some of their the school's websites are very easy to navigate down and find financial aid, where you'll be able to find the deadlines, and some are not quite as intuitive. So it's up to you, but you could just Google, financial aid and then the college name, and I guarantee you it'll be a lot quicker.
Okay, so we're talking about these lists that we need to make and the things that we need to do to be proactive in making sure that our student receives all the financial aid. But going back to the FAFSA in the prior year, so I have another question. The EFC makes our financial aid options null and void, but we don't have the money to pay for school.
Okay, so the FAFSA basically produces the EFC. The EFC stands for expected family contribution. It's a number that gets calculated from the FAFSA, and it sort of gives the college an idea of what the family can afford to pay. But I do want to also give you a caveat here that you may be required at certain colleges and universities to fill out a secondary application called the CSS Profile. It's a College Board-based application, and so you may be required to fill it out for, not just the FAFSA, but also the CSS Profile. So I do want to mention that here because I don't want you to miss a deadline for the profile because you only thought they needed the FAFSA. So again, this is why it's very important to look at the financial aid office's websites, or quite honestly, pick up the phone and call them and say, I'm just double checking, what do you need from me and when? If you want to go to cssprofile.org, it will kind of towards the top of the page, you'll be able to look up a participating list of colleges and universities that require it. There are only about 275 colleges that need it. So it's not all over the map. But the FAFSA is absolutely a requirement if you want any kind of Title IV aid at a campus. So, think of the FAFSA is really like, everybody's going to want that. But the CSS profile is just going to be a subset. I veered off your question a little bit, Peachy, there, but I wanted to make sure it's important that people know that like certain colleges do want that secondary application. But the EFC question is really where you were going. And so, the CSS profile actually produces a different EFC than the FAFSA, so they're not going to match exactly. And the profile does not tell you what the EFC is. It won't show up on the form. Whereas with the FAFSA, when you file it, it gives you the EFC. It's like on the top right-hand corner of the report that you get, so which is called a student aid report. So you're going to get your EFC on one form, but not the other. And honestly, it just depends on what the college can afford to give you. So they have limited institutional funds. In addition to you applying for federal funds and state funds, you're also asking the college, hey, do you have any free money you could afford to give me also? And so they all are different. They all have different pockets of money. And so none of your financial aid awards are going to match. But for those folks who say that their EFC is too high, meaning their expected family contribution is too high, meaning greater than the cost of attendance, so therefore the college won't give you any need-based aid. That does happen sometimes, particularly if it's a lower cost institution and the family, just kind of, they hit that number really fast. But at higher cost institutions, maybe you don't think you would qualify, but maybe you would. At absolute minimum, you would qualify for a federal Stafford loan. So as a freshman, you would qualify for $3,500 plus $2,000, so $5,500 at least of a Stafford loan. Now it may be, if you don't have any need at all, like if no need is calculated when you fill out these forms, at minimum the college will give you what's called an unsubsidized Stafford loan, which means that the interest is accruing while you're in school. It's unsubsidized. The government is not subsidizing it while you're in college. But you'd still be able to get a hold of $5,500 there. And beyond that, you can always apply for federal parent loans. You can also, most importantly, because you really want to be looking for free money. I mean, who doesn't want free money? So you really want to be looking for outside scholarships. And so now's a good time for you to start because it's never too early to try to start and get an outside scholarship. Because if you start adding these up, I used to have students who would somehow miraculously, they were so good at this, they would accumulate, I remember one student, she had like over 10. In a year. That took her some effort to work on it. But even if you were able to pick up one for $1,000 or one for $2,000, and it does start to add up, and it helps you towards your books and supplies, and it just starts to tick away at the cost of attendance. So definitely look at outside scholarships. College Ave has one that we do every month for $1,000. So there's all sorts of places you can look right in your backyard at local businesses in your hometowns. You can go more regionally or more national. You could, there's lots of different places that offer it. Walmart, the Elks Club, local businesses, churches, all sorts of places. They like to help kids get money towards school. So start there. You definitely want to try that. Plus the Stafford loans are going to be available to you. And then beyond that, it would be additional loan programs and hopefully some merit scholarships as well if the colleges offer it.
Right. So, okay, so let's go into the parents that have two kids in college or two kids going to college at the same time. I know someone who has a situation where one files on their income tax and the other parent files on their income tax. Is that advisable? Will that help allay, or defer some of the costs, defray some of the costs involved with that?
Okay, so I'll put my financial aid officer hat on here. So you have to be truthful when you file the FAFSA. So it is a federal document, and so you're kind of signing off that the truth is there. And so what they ask you on the FAFSA is basically, essentially who is providing greater than half of your support. And so if that person is, a lot of times it's the person you're living with most of the time, but there's a lot of families that have like 50-50 custody. And so they kind of go back and forth between homes and it's sort of half and half, but you kind of have to make a judgment call on, who is providing just over greater than half of the support. I mean, and that's really how the FAFSA is phrased. And it's pretty much, it's how the Css Profile is phrased too. If they're looking for that. So you wouldn't, if you have two kids in college and you, as let's say you, Peachy, or the mother, and you're providing greater than half the support for both of them, you should be the one filing the FAFSA. And it shouldn't be the other parent, because that's not really truthful. So you really, I'm gonna sort of preach the rules of the FAFSA are that you kind of have.
We want the real. We want the real.
Yeah, because honestly, down the line, the Department of Education, who administers the federal aid programs, and they ask colleges and universities to go through what's called a verification process. So there is a chance that they may ask you for documentation down the line. So you never really want to get yourself down into a hole where you thought it might work okay to kind of put two different parents down, but that's not really the truth. I just highly wouldn't recommend it. So that's my advice as a financial aid, ex-financial aid administrator. So
definitely, we need that advice. So, when you talk about financial aid, and then we talk about the different pools of money that the different schools receive, how does one school determine what one student will get? Or, I've heard people say, well, they said they ran out of funds. So this is a two-part question. So that's part one, but part two is, what about the people who just decided, oh, I want to go to college, or I was waitlisted and now I just got my acceptance letter, or I want to go to a different school? How does that affect the financial aid process?
Okay, so there are certain aid programs where that can happen, where they could run out, funding could dry up before you get your application in. So I'll give you an example too, like the wait list. That's a really good example, because that doesn't happen until typically after the May 1st enrollment deadline, where you have to choose where you want to go to college. The wait list happens after May 1st, so you won't necessarily find out until May 1st or beyond that you've been accepted to this institution. So you're kind of a late applicant, but you didn't, you may have already submitted your application earlier because you didn't know if you were going to be waitlisted or accepted, through regular means. But nonetheless, if you're literally submitting your financial aid application in late, maybe you're a transfer student, you're not deciding until August that you want to go, or maybe you're coming out of high school and you don't decide till August that you want to go into a community college or something. Totally fine. These options are awesome. They're out there. Some colleges are, sort of have this open admission, if you will, like a community college. They have an open admission, so they're going to look at people right up to the wire. So you would be applying late. That wasn't your fault. It's just you made a decision later. It's okay. There are certain programs that will run out. Okay, so SEOG could be one of them, because but SEOG I mentioned earlier. they only get so much of that money. So they may have already spent all their money on that. And the same would go for federal work study, because those two programs are called campus-based programs and they're limited funds. And just think of it as like, I've got this pot of, money, and
Excuse me.
I don't have any more. So there are the SEOG and work study, they could run out before you get to it. The other one that you could be in jeopardy on is a state grant program. Now I worked in a state where the deadline for the state grant was, very generous. I mean, it was way down the line. But I also just heard, actually a couple days ago, there was a state that, their deadline had already passed for this upcoming fall. So it's pretty rigid. So you would want to also know what the state grant deadlines are, and maybe do your application prior, early, even though you don't know for sure if you're going to go to college. Because if you file the FAFSA, it's no harm, no foul. You just do it in, earlier in the spring, maybe. Same with the state grant program in your state. If you're staying in state, it's typically, they require you to be in state to get that money. But that would be my advice, is to kind of get the applications in early, and that way you're already kind of in the queue, at least for some things. But it is possible they may run out. The other things are entitlement programs, like the federal Pell Grant. If you apply late, you're still entitled to the money, even though you applied late. And the same thing is the federal Stafford loan. You apply late, doesn't matter. They're still going to package you with that. Package meaning create your financial aid amount. They would still put that financial aid out there for you.
Okay.
So hopefully that helps.
That's good to know. That's really good to know. So let's get into student loans. The infamous student loans. You kind of touched on student loans and what's available to the students,
Yep.
Once they get in and maybe they can't afford, going to school just on grants, or they don't qualify for that type of financial aid. So when we talk about student loans, what are some of the things that parents need to be mindful of? Because a lot of times, because students are usually of age, so they can get a student loan without their parent even knowing.
Yes.
Because they're considered adults in some cases.
Yeah. Essentially, if you are less than the age of 24, you're considered a dependent on the application, on the FAFSA. So technically, it's going to ask for parental data if available. There are lots of kids that are in other situations where there is no parental data available, which is a separate topic. But so again, your question was really more about like an overview of student loans. Really, I guess that would be most helpful to me would be what is available. So the first thing you want to look at is the student loan, because that's the federal Stafford loan. Essentially, the student is the applicant, so the parent is not on the application. They don't run a credit check or anything for it. It's a federal program. There is a slight fee on it. It's just about 1% of the loan amount is taken off the top. So the federal government takes that. And then the interest rates, actually the new rates have been announced. Those are 5.05% for next year, for 1920. And so, you want to try that. There used to be another student loan called federal Perkins loan. So if you were aware of that at one time, because maybe you have an older child who went through college, that program has since ceased. So there is no new funding for the federal Perkins program. So just FYI on that. A lot of parents, they want some parents don't want the students to take out the loans because they want to try to help them as best as they can. But the reality of it is that it's kind of part of affording college. The average student loan amount, I used to work at the College Board for about 7 years. And so the College Board always, they have trends data on like student aid and college pricing and things like that. And the College Board data from the past fall indicated that basically between the average student loans are between $28,000 and $32,000 for a 4-year degree, which when you think about it, isn't really too bad, because you're investing in your future, essentially. You're trying to get a degree that will better you in terms of your life. And so it's, 28 to 32,000 is kind of the average. At certain colleges, it may be less. At certain colleges, it may be more in terms of the average. But nonetheless, I think sometimes parents feel that the student should have a little bit of skin in the game and, kind of help out with the overall picture, and it might just be a reality that they just need it. I mean, if we considered that, on the financial aid side, we considered that as part of affording education, and we on the college side were doing our part to give as much institutional grant money or free money as we could. And then you add that to the state and the grant programs, and you add those loans in, and everything's kind of part of it. It's just all part of affording your education. So beyond the student loan, the Stafford loan, the parents can take out a federal plus, let's call it a federal plus loan. Those fees are a little over 4%. Next year, the rate on that is 7.6%. And the parents essentially is borrowing this, for the student. And then beyond that, you could look at other loans like, College Ave, we have private loans. They're called private loans, or you could call them alternative loans. They're really, the wording it's all semantics. I mean, they're both the same thing, private or alternative loans. But they're essentially, running credit checks and looking at your ability to pay back a loan and giving you a a better rate if you have better credit history and better, kind of ability to repay. And then there are other things like home equity loans and things like that too, that you could look at for, trying to kind of scoop it all together and make it affordable for you as a family.
Okay, and so you touched on the students that do not have parental information. How do they handle that?
So it will vary. So for example, like if there's a legal guardian, that person's information does not, basically when you read the FAFSA, when you're filling it out, which is online now, everything's online. They don't really do paper FAFSAs anymore. You can do it on your smartphone, you can do it on your website, whatever. But it will kind of follow you through in terms of the advice, in terms of what data to put down. But for example, there are questions on the FAFSA regarding homelessness and things like that too. So those questions kind of lead down a path of whether or not parental data, quote unquote, is needed, or will the student just be treated as an independent student, as if they were 24 years old or 25 or older, you know what I mean? So the thing that happens is that even though you wouldn't necessarily have to put parental data down for certain situations on the FAFSA application, the CSS profile may, it may align with the FAFSA, but what may happen is those colleges that kind of look a little deeper, they're really in the weeds on looking at the family structure and the things that are available to the student, basically, people who are supporting that student somehow. The college may ask you for some more information. So they, just so you know, like even though you check a box essentially on a FAFSA, it doesn't mean that they're not going to ask you some more questions about it. So be prepared to provide proof. Like if you're a ward of the court, be prepared that you may have to provide proof of that if you are asked. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, this was awesome information. You covered everything, almost everything. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I guess I would just tell people not to panic. I would say, I spent a long time sort of helping people over all these years to guide parents and students into making sure that they didn't miss the deadlines or they didn't miss out on an opportunity. And the truth is, the best thing to do is if you have a special circumstance, which a lot of people do, maybe you have a loss of job or, you're, maybe you had to withdraw from retirement to keep the lights on because of a loss of job or something like that. That's considered something special that's happening in your life that you need to really tell the financial aid office about. So I would advise for those of you who have a special situation, make sure that you're communicating that to each of the financial aid offices so that they can take that into account, because they might be able to help you out further. If you don't tell them, they're not going to know. And so you're just going to be data on a form. But if you provide, your story, and the CSS profile actually allows you 2,000 characters to type that story, but the FAFSA doesn't. So if you're applying at a school that is only asking for the FAFSA, you're going to need to, communicate with the financial aid offices and, pick up the phone, maybe go visit the campus if possible. It's not across the country and you're able to get there. Make a relationship with these folks, and they do want to help you, and they want you to be able to come. And the thing about it is, once you come to college, they don't want you to leave. They want you to be able to graduate. So don't just not tell them things. You need to communicate with them and tell them what your situation is, and that way everybody wins, basically.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to our parent group. And anytime you want to come back, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And if you have any more information, you can submit questions to me and I can get them to Katrina. And don't forget that we have someone coming on July 11th for separation anxiety and time management. So don't forget that one coming up. So Katrina, thank you again so much for being a part. Now you're a part of our family.
Peachy.
And we thank you so much. And anytime and anything you ever need, just call.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Here.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.